and getting all the right traction. Welcome to TikTok. Welcome to Instagram Live as well. We're doing the Diary of a Property Investor, and welcome to Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and every other platform. We're live streaming right now. This is my journey to my first million I'm going to be talking about today. Part 8. Okay, so here's part 8. If you want to see the other 7 parts previously to that, of how I did this, and learn from that as well, please feel free to click on the link on the post to the playlist for our YouTube channel, 5 Properties TV, and our playlist, which is Diary of a Property Investor. That's the golden opportunity for you to learn for free on how to become extremely successful in property investment and wealth creation. That's really what comes down to, Richard. I can't say that anymore. Oh my God. It's like somebody, it's a multi-millionaire telling you exactly what to do. It's like, wow, where do you get that? Anywhere. But folk just didn't get it because it's like, oh, it must be free. It's like, that's how they treat it.
Yeah.
There's going to be some people out there, Richard, that actually cotton onto this and go, oh my God, maybe I actually better watch some of this.
And see, and listen.
And actually see what's going on. Because, it's timeless content for me, but I'm actually documenting it for the purpose of the next series, also a book as well, and also a course as well, what we're needing to do. So that's the reason that I'm out there doing this right now and recording all this. You're getting a huge benefit of getting all this information. I could have done it privately, but I think it's good to actually involve other people as well, in case they want to ask questions. Plus the fact, Richard, you've got loads of investors out there that are coming to you going, I never knew this. I never knew I could actually do these sort of things. So this is my journey for my first 30 properties, which actually made my first million when I left my work and I was financially free for the first time, and a millionaire at that point in time. Not a millionaire as in the number of properties I had, millionaire as in net worth.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to hear your journey, but I think, like you see, Jim, it's quite educational as well, and really good to go through that journey with you. You see, we're doing your first 30 properties. I think we've just passed like the halfway point.
We're at 20. We're at
20. Aye. So, and then you left off last week. We're about to talk about another 3-bedroom masonette property that you've got, and you were quite excited about this one. So let's pick up where we left off.
And what did I learn off of this one? Oh, this was a bit tragic. This was this one I learned about. I suppose I remember when I bought this one. It was back in 2002, in January 2002. I actually bought it for £16,777 for a 3-bedroom upper maisonette. Now, at that time, I was renting them for about £420. So that was a good return for that, because when you think about it, 400, it's about £5,000 a year. £5,000 a year you're getting in rent for a property that you bought for 16,700. Right place, right time. I'd say that, but I think it was a lot to do with preparation, as you've known in the journey so far, and preparation and point of readiness, and opportunity appeared. That's really what that came down to. That's where all that came from. The opportunity was, I was ready at the point, and I was prepared at the point with all the knowledge I'd accumulated and what I was doing so far in terms of my property journey. This was when a lot of people were beginning to see at that point in time. It's like, oh my God, what's he doing? What is he doing? He's here actually making these huge returns. And that's when a lot of people started to jump into the buy-to-let market, and the buy-to-let market started to grow. So when I first got involved in the buy-to-let market, it was about 9% of UK housing stock overall, private landlords represented. Now, today, it's round about 18 to 19% of UK stock.
20%. But...
Well, it's 20% to say the now, but the reality is, I'm not very sure if it's that much anymore.
Quite there yet, but
because I'm going to be talking to the National Residential Landlords magazine after this, talking about the Scottish property market and what the government's doing and how that will affect overall the private landlords market. But to be honest, I keep saying to people out there that say, get your pitchforks and your torches out and we'll go and hunt some private landlords. I keep saying to them, the day that the government builds adequate and a social housing and affordable housing to accommodate everybody else that we're housing is the day I'll exit the market. I genuinely probably want to leave this market and actually just wash my hands of it and say, I'm out. But I know the amount of families that will displace, and there's nowhere for them to go. So that's kind of why I'm hanging around and actually staying where I am and actually continuing to invest in the market, because I don't know if it becomes an obligation after a while. Yeah, I've
You will
always been a
feel
very,
like that,
very social landlord, very social in that respect. Possibly even more social than some of the social landlords, and in terms of how I take decisions.
Yeah.
But that's in previous shows we've discussed that. 140 Taylor Street was actually quite a good one. I'd not mentioned the address here. Sometimes I don't want to mention that, but it was quite a good one because I remember this was one where a few tenants had actually moved in, completely destroyed the house, and then all of a sudden they actually expected their deposit back. And I'm like,
Yeah.
and they hadn't paid their rent either for it, the top ups and all the rest that they were meant to pay and they were meant to adhere to as part of the agreement. But I'm not talking about just destroy the house. I'm talking about cat shit under the kitchen counter. Underneath in between, the back of the kicker boards.
The kickboards, yeah.
When I took the kickboards off, there was cat shit underneath there. And it's like, how does that happen? And who lives like that? But that's the type of people who would actually, it's like, can I get my deposit back? And that's the people today that often moan and have a go at private landlords and say, it's terrible, they kept all my money and kept all my deposit. And I'm no surprised. It's like, but I've had that loads and loads of times in the past, and this was the one that highlighted it for me, where you did get a lot of tenants actually come back to you and say, oh, well, what about getting my deposit back? And I think that's the good thing about having the deposit protection scheme now.
Yeah.
As well as the for what they think is protecting the tenant, it also protects the landlord to a certain degree as well from, stark reality like this.
Yeah.
Where the tenant still goes away and thinks they're actually in the right, and the deposit protection scheme is actually in the wrong. And I'm like, are you having a laugh? It's like there's the photographs of when you moved in, brand new carpets, completely decorated and painted, and pristine inside. And there's the photographs of the mountain of crap that you've left in here, the carpets you've destroyed, the wallpaper that your kids have written all over, and the cat shit that's under the kitchen bunker. And you're asking me for your deposit back.
Yeah. There'll be a lot of people, new landlords and investors and new agents and things as well, that will come from they've obviously started in a time where the deposit scheme's always been in place. But I remember for a few years, and Jim, you'll obviously remember when there wasn't a deposit scheme, and it wasn't the easiest thing to try and execute deposit return and release. And so the deposit scheme's definitely a definite plus in that area.
So I had actually, later on in this one, I'd actually remortgaged it because obviously the market was up in 2006 and it was happy days. So I managed to get a mortgage on it. And it was one of my negative equity ones where you had a deferred capital gain as well if you tried to exit. And just to explain that to people out there, I had remortgaged it up to 52,000. It is literally only worth about 60,000 today. Mm-hmm. After all these years, you're talking about 20 years later. But these are few and far between, these things that happen. But if you've no intention of selling, it makes no difference. It's like the people are laughing on TikTok right now and having the argy-bargy back and forward with me, saying, you're going to be sorry this year when property prices crash to the bottom, and it's going to be worse than the 1929s and the 1930s. And I'm like, it makes no difference what property prices are. It's like, if I'm still earning an income and somebody's living in it, I couldn't care less what property prices end up at like. It's only if the mortgage comes to an end, then I think, oh God, where does that leave me? I'll have to exit and I'll have to sell the property. But that time, you're facing a deferred capital gain, and then you're obviously deferred trying to pay back 52,000 in a mortgage. But that 52,000 allowed me to release money from the 16, and then allowed me to go and buy more property, which is what I did. Yeah. So why would I not do that? Because they're making money on the money, as long as the tolerance is right. So to give you an idea about where we are right now, I mean, that's I'm getting 450 rent on that, and it's 212 for the mortgage. The mortgage is fixed for 5 years now. We talked about that, where I had the opportunity. Check this with your bank, by the way. Even though this property is not the right loan to value to the bank still allows you to go online and actually do an online switch without actually ever getting a valuation done on the property, because 20 years have passed as far as they're concerned. Yeah, so the bank actually thinks the property is worth £100,000 when it's no. And normal indexation. But they're no bothered. It's a small thing in the context of thing. Plus the fact it keeps somebody in the property and it keeps them looked after. So that's why I continue to do it. So there's the lessons I've learned out of that one, and the fact that that's what it's taught me. But we've done ongoing repairs and improvements over the years in these properties, and we're still doing that today.
Yeah.
So that tolerance, that degree of tolerance of money in to money out, and you notice I'm not really bothered about the overheads. I'm only bothered about the direct cost, and the direct cost to me is the finance.
Mm-hmm.
If there's enough money after the finance is paid, because that's the only person that you should be as important as the mortgage lender, because they're the only person that could do anything about it, then everything else can follow later on. You've got to understand that. If, in the worst case scenario we talk about, you really should have your property managed, by the way, by a letting agent. I'm not caring where you are and where you are in the country. And if you think you should do it yourself, I can prove every other time, any time I can prove why you should not manage the property yourself.
Yeah, I've just been in one this morning, and it's a prime example. No agent in place, and it's anyway.
Every single time I can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt why you should never manage your own property. Every single time. You're losing thousands because you manage your own property. Just let me say that again. You're losing thousands because you manage your own properties. You do, and it's like, well, wait a minute. What do you mean, Jim? That's going to cost me thousands to get it managed. Well, it's less than the price of a cup of coffee every single day to have it managed. And you've not got any heartache anymore. And the time you've just released, you can actually go and make more money with the time that you've got. Why would you try to save £2 a day almost in your management fee? Because that's effectively what it is. If that £2 a day can release your time, and you could earn, even if it was an hour a day, you could earn maybe £20 an hour. If you could earn £20 an hour, why are you trying to save £2?
Yeah, and the amount of your own time that you use to try and keep up with compliance and everything, it's not worth it.
I call it broke mentality.
Yeah.
People are just broke at a different level. What it is, in other words, their whole lifestyle is at a different level, but their still net worth is actually negative. They're broke. They're stony broke. I don't care if they've got $1 million coming in every year. If you've got 1.2 million going out, you're broke, even though you're earning $1 million. Broke at a different level.
Yeah.
Once you understand that concept, you'll realize where that is actually, the penny will drop and you'll realize where you are. So that's probably the valuable lesson that property taught me at that time. There's loads and loads of others. I remember a guy as well, Alan. I remember actually with Alan, I'd actually got Alan a job because I'd managed to get him a job somewhere because he was really desperate for work. And I went, no bother, I'll see if I can set something up with you. Just because I was in the industry at that time and I was one of the managers. So I got him a job, no bother. But it then transpired because of his situation. It was potentially, he had to pay money to his ex-wife and the kids and all the rest of it. It ended up the case that he was actually better off not working. And it wasn't for the fact that he wasn't wanting to pay any money to his children, but by the time he did all that and the amount they got cut back, they were worse off as well with him working. So he was worse off of working, they were worse off of working. So it actually came to the conclusion. So that was a lesson it taught me about how the system works and how the benefit system works.
I see that.
And it doesn't reward people that are on the marginal cuff, on the cusp of the marginal difference. So for every pound they earn, they're actually earning less in their hand than they would actually be on benefits. So unless they can get to a huge jump in terms of their earning power, it doesn't pay them to work. The system still does that today.
Yeah.
It doesn't pay people to work. It's absolutely crazy. So that's probably the lesson I've learned out of this one. The next one was actually quite interesting. This is when I started to buy for a lot more. Because it had come to, now see there's a difference here. That was January 2002 that I bought that property. And my next property I actually bought in July 2004. So I bought the next property in July 2004. And it's because I had stopped because what had happened was the market was starting to recover, repossessions were starting to disappear, therefore there was no opportunities appearing anymore. So I just sat on my hands for a while. Now, see, it's okay to sit and just wait for things to, not wait for it to happen, but see the opportunities. Be prepared. I see so many people out there today, so many investors out there today. It's like, I've got 100,000, I've got to invest it. And it's like, what are you going to invest it in? Oh, I'll just buy the first, always buy the first property that appears. And it's like, the numbers don't make sense. So just hold off and wait for the right one to come along. And they look at me like I've got two heads. It's like, but surely I would want to invest it straight away to make money straight away. Well, the numbers don't make sense. If anything goes wrong, you're going to be left out in a limb.
Yeah.
You're going to be left high and dry. You're going to be. Warren Buffett talks about all the time. If the tide goes out, you better make sure you're not swimming naked.
Mm-hmm.
And that means exposed to the market, exposed to the interest rates fluctuations, exposed to voids, exposed to rental differences, whether it goes up or down. Now, the rental values actually over the years from 2004 to about 2012 actually started to go down. And I wasn't exposed to that because I was made sure that I covered myself for that. So this is where the Scottish Government talks about. It's like, oh, all these rents have gone up astronomically since 2012. You're absolutely right, because they dropped like a stone from 2004 to 2012. And if you take that into account, overall, the rental values haven't really gone up that much overall anyway over the years. From 2004, from 20 years ago, because 20 years ago, we were getting about £400 to £450 for a two-bedroom flat. What we're getting for a two-bedroom flat today, Richard?
Round about the same, maybe 475.
And yet the Scottish Government's out there castigating landlords, saying they're getting super high and super rich rents all the time. No, we're not. You're only showing the ones that you want to show to justify your story.
Because there is certain ones, obviously, that are, but I mean, generally, we're no much more than that now.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was actually the first leap of faith. Now, what had started to happen out of this was I'd started to get people coming to me now, actually approaching me because they knew I was buying, and they were starting to approach me. And this person actually approached me. She had a pristine property, a two-bedroom ground floor flat. It had a brand new kitchen. It was completely decorated and carpeted. It was immaculate inside, and she just wanted to move to somewhere else. She was ready to move, and she just approached me and says, "Look, I'm kind of selling my property. Is it something you'd want to buy? I just want to do a private deal. It's easy for me to do it. I know you're a good buyer because you've got a track record." And we agreed a price, £30,822. But at that time, £30,822, I was getting £450 a month.
Mm-hmm.
So why was I going to complain about that? Because it was still a really good return. That was
and you wouldn't have the work to put in to turn it around either.
Aye, for a 30 grand property. Interestingly enough, though, over the years, actually, this is actually on a 6.69%. It's on a variable rate just now.
Right.
But it's a 27 grand mortgage. I've never borrowed more against this property ever.
Mm-hmm.
See how that is? That's almost 20 years have passed, and I've still got the same mortgage, and I've not actually borrowed against it all these years because the tolerance of the extra lending against the money I'm bringing in, against the money it's costing to run it, doesn't make sense. Therefore, I will not borrow against it. That is far too risky for me.
Yeah.
I will not take these risks. I will take calculated risks. I will take risks that I know it is very unlikely for the worst case scenario to happen. But the worst case scenario to happen with this one would be disaster, which would mean everybody else would come with us. This goes back to my theory of if you're running with everyone else and someone's running after you to catch you, could be the bank, because obviously the lending's no right and they've got to call their loans in, make damn sure you're running faster than everyone else.
Yeah.
And that's the scenario, because they'll get caught first. And this is why I hedge myself, because I think to myself, if I hedge myself on a tolerance right now and actually plan myself from my interest rate levels right, if interest rates go up another 5%, all the homeowners are going before me.
Yeah.
That'll make my market even better, by the way, because they'll need to rent.
Yeah, they would, yeah.
So I'll be even better off because they'll need to rent. And I'll have full occupancy then if that's the case. But everybody else will go before me. And if everybody else goes before me, you know what the government's going to do? They're going to step in.
Yeah.
They're going to step in. And if they don't step in, hey, We're all going to hell in a handbasket.
Yeah, we're all going together. Yeah.
Aye, it's like why would I? I'm wanting to concern. I sat and talked about Elaine last night. I actually briefly mentioned, and I says, if we lost everything tomorrow, we've still got our pensions, we've still got our house. None of them's encumbered or tied into anything. We've still got our place in Spain, if we're fully paid off. That's no tied into anything either. So we're pretty well off, even though
you would still live quite comfortably. Yeah.
Well, live comfortably. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Comfortable is an understatement. It's like, my God, if I lost everything tomorrow in terms of the properties, it wouldn't make a damn bit of difference. If I lost my job, I'd still be better off than 95% of the population.
But that's all down to obviously your planning and things and how you've set that out over the years to put you in that position so that if the worst happens, you're still fine and you still got
This is why it's important to properly plan your strategy about where you are right now and how you need to go forward and what degree of tolerance and risk you want to put on to your investments.
Yeah.
And this is the classic example about where we are right now. I have got an open variable rate on that, but the mortgage is 27,000 and the actual interest on it is £153 a month. And just now, I'm actually only earning 370 when I could actually earn a lot more.
Yeah.
That could earn 450, even 495, quite possibly at a push.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at even 370 versus 153, you're still clearing 220 quid for overheads. So I've got a real good degree of tolerance for interest rates going up again. So if interest rates go up and double, I'm still even covered for my interest. So if interest rates double, and when interest rates double, again, I'll come back to saying everybody else is going before me. So why would I bother? If the whole rest of the economy and the rest of the world has had it, it's not going to make any difference to you whether you've got money or no. Think about that. It's not going to make any difference whether you've got the money or no, because inflation's going to be rocketing sky high. Your £1 million is going to buy you a penny dainty, a sweetie. The way that works, you see it in places like Argentina. You see it in places, all the places I've got super and hyperinflation. You see that all the time where they're walking about with barrel loads of money. That was the whole thing, but just to pay a bill, just to pay what would we consider maybe a £50 bill, and they've got a barrel load of money to pay it because their currency's been undermined that much and it's been eroded and deflated that much. This is why it's important to actually get inflation under control.
Yeah.
Because the way the world works, I mean, if the world worked in a different way, it wouldn't matter about inflation, because inflation would be completely irrelevant and we would all be in a utopian society where we didn't need to want for anything. But unfortunately, the majority of people in power don't want that to happen ever.
No.
That's why when Elon Musk came out with it and said in front of the Arabs, a conference in the Arab nations, and he came out with that and says we could have a utopian society where everybody could be paid the same amount of money and we could all live happily together. They all just went, sorry? Maybe don't want that. That means we've got to give something away here. They'll never let that happen. No. We're too far gone down the road. It'll take a catastrophic event for anything like that ever to happen. So that's in 2004. So I did wait 2 years before I started buying again. But this is because I started advertising. This is where I started to get a bit of education. It was actually a Russ Whitney seminar I went to in Edinburgh. It was Ian, my friend that took me to it. We were talking about property investment at the time or something like that. And Ian said, there's a seminar, some American organizations running a seminar in assembly rooms and in Edinburgh, maybe go along. It's not going to cost anything. So I went along, and it's a typical upsell, to get you on another course. They were selling courses at £3,000 at that time. So when you think about it, that's 20 years ago, and yet they're selling courses at £3,000 now. So that was a huge amount of money.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah. So this is where it benefited me, because it was all about networking, and it was also about just learning wee snippets of information. This is where I got the expression of Jim, you'll turn up to the opening of an envelope if it'll further your business. And I would say that you're goddamn right. I would turn up to the opening of an envelope if it'll further my business.
So it's going to benefit you, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that I learned out of that was, it was one wee snippet before I walked out the door. They said from the stage, if you're looking to source more property, just put a lineage ad in the paper about houses and flats for cash. That's it. And your telephone number. Houses and flats for cash, telephone number. That's it. See,
we used to get a lot for that.
Telephone calls I got. Now, the equivalent today is obviously what you've got now is people go on social media and say, you can invest with me. And I'm trying to source as property sourcers. By that time, we didn't know what a property sourcer was. So I was doing the houses and flats for cash advert, and I was getting leads off of that. Now, the majority of leads, I was never a estate agent at the time, so the majority of leads I was saying to them, like, there's no way I could pay that type of money. I'm in probably this type at that level. And to be honest, I wouldn't, and this was honestly of me, I actually said, I wouldn't want to, for want of a better phrase, rip you off by actually underselling your property, because I always thought it was completely immoral taking advantage of somebody, especially them not knowing what the true value of their property was.
Yeah.
And at that time, I used to say to people on the phone, well, to be honest, I'm in it a lot less. It'll probably be around about that level, but you'd be better to go to another. I used to recommend an estate agent, a typical estate agent. I'm not going to say what their name was, but I used to recommend them and say, look, you'd be better to go to them, and they'll get top dollar for you. They'll probably get about this amount of money, and you'll get far more out of it there. There's no point coming to me. I can't pay you that type of money. And most people are actually grateful for that. And I think I built a reputation out of that for that reason, of the fact that honesty and integrity.
It's the thing about speaking to the right person in the right situation, the person that's expertise in that side of things. Like you say, obviously they're talking about the property value. At that time, you weren't really the right person to be advising them, so you put them on the right one. And it's the same in any instance with this financial side of things, or this.
Absolutely. I've got a quick question on TikTok the other now. It says, me and my wife are trying to save up for a house in Fife. What advice would you give us to achieve this? If you can get on the property ladder now, do it, because it puts you in a place where you now have got equilibrium. So in other words, if property prices continue to go up, you've secured yourself at that level. Plus the fact interest rates, if it's going to be the next year you're going to buy, interest rates will go up in the next year, even though property prices go down. Or they might go down. I mean, I'm predicting around about 5%, if anything. I've got a funny feeling. I was talking this morning, indicators suggest to me that the property prices might not go down at all. And that's what you don't want, because then you're not on the ladder yet. You're not at that position. You've not secured your position. So my advice is probably try and go for it now, especially if you're renting, because there's no point. I mean, if you're renting, you may as well convert it to a mortgage and pay the mortgage. You're just paying the bank the rent from now on. But you've got security of tenure, plus you've got the house. You've got ongoing costs as well associated with that. But you've got to work that out for yourself. I don't know your circumstances. If you're living with bank of mum and dad, then take it for what it's got. Save as much money as possible.
Make use of that while you can.
It's like I say to my boys, whatever you do is never move out of this house until you have to, and save as much money and invest as much money as you can, because when you get your property for the first time, it'll be a constant drain on you for the rest of your life. Home ownership will be a constant drain on you for the rest of your life, by the way.
Yeah, it's a continual expense.
You've got to pay. I mean, my boys are a lot older now, and they've got money because of that. But I had home ownership at 21 years old, and I tell you what, it was the mortgage, it was the having to live within your means, it was the council tax or the rates at that time, it was the repair bills, it was the cleaning, it was the heating, it was everything that went with it. And so it's not just a mortgage; it's everything associated with it. It wipes out your income straight away. It's the biggest thing that you'll do, more than likely. So be vigilant, but work out the numbers for yourself to make sure it makes sense for you. So that's all I can say. If you want a bit further advice, contact our office direct if you're local to Fife.
Also, Jim, Also, Jim, if you say to them, if they're looking for money saving tips and things, we've done the wealth creation show on how to obviously cut back and discipline yourself on spending and things.
Yeah, we did on the wealth creation show on the playlist here. You've got a cost of living crisis, how to survive the cost of living crisis, how to save an absolute fortune, probably about £1,500 a month in savings overall that you could make every single month. So you'll get something out of that probably on the wealth creation show, how to survive the cost of living crisis. So that's my advice I can give to you there. So that was there in 2004, and then the next one was again a phone call. This was a phone call. This was a 1-bedroom lower flat.
1 bed lower.
Now they actually phoned me on the back of that and said, houses and flats for cash, 1-bedroom flat. It says, what are you looking for? And they says, well, probably looking for about 15,000. And I went, okay, 1-bedroom flat. I'll probably get about 320 for that. 15,000, yeah, that sounds about right for me. So I went round and I did, I went to see them. And this was a weird one because it's like I went round and I'm in at that level. And then when we're going round, they're saying, oh, well, the heating's not that great. I'll knock off £1,000 for you. What? Okay. And I think at one point I says, well, you didn't need to do that. And he says, but I feel really embarrassed. I'm just going to give you it for a bit less. And I think I ended up purchasing it for 14,500. So I got £1,000 off. Now, interestingly enough, actually, I did do a major upgrade on this because it needed rewired. It needed a new heating system in. All the walls were all the old Artex. And this is never coming off. You're never going to get this off. So I just sheeted every single room. I just sheeted all the room. Now the living room was quite tiny, and you know that yourself for this one. Yeah. But it's fine because it's only a 1-bedroom. And I put a new kitchen in, rewired, new heating system, and it cost me about 10 grand to do that at that time, which is a lot of money. So all in, this was about 26,000. I got a mortgage at the time because I remortgaged at 31,000. So I remortgaged at 31 because I had a higher rate. I got a lifetime tracker plus 1.49. This is the start of the lifetime trackers. And I've still got a lot of them today. Lifetime trackers, base plus 1.49. This was the Northern Rock throwing money against the wall, trying to lend to everybody it moved and giving off huge deals. Lifetime trackers at base plus 0.99, 1.49. And I couldn't look gift horse in the mouth. I've still got that lifetime tracker today. So literally, again, I've not remortgaged one of that property. So literally, it's 128 quid a month in interest only, and you get 360 for it. So again, a huge Todd. But you see,
long-term tenant in there as well.
But you see, at that time, I have. At that time, I was probably renting for 320, and I'm getting 360. And you're talking about 20 years later. So at what point has it gone up astronomically over the years? It hasn't.
No.
At all. It's a complete fabricated lie that the Scottish Government's telling us. Most properties haven't gone up that huge amount of value. They're just using the bigger properties to actually justify their story. So lifetime tracker, kept that on, and that's the thing I learned out of that. If you just keep quiet when you're going around, people will give you money off. That's a really good one for house negotiation as well. When you're going to buy a house,
let them talk. Yeah.
Let them do all the talking. Keep your mouth shut when you're walking around. Obviously, do the things that you want to do, like what about this and what about that. But if you have so many questions about stuff, they then begin to apologise for what they've got, and then they then actually put the value down in their own head when you're negotiating. So that's a really good point to emphasise about negotiation. How you could do that when you're walking around. So this started to teach me about negotiation, how you do it. Interestingly enough, in between as well, one of my friends approached me to sell his flat in the houses and flats for cash. I realised it was them, and they wanted to sell me it, and it was above a shop in Methil Haven, so Methil Hill. So above a shop in Methil Hill. I knew him. It was one of my friends from years ago. At the time, he said, "Look, I'm happy to exit at £14,000," and I'm going, "No, you'll get 17 grand for this." No, I'll give it to you for 14. And I'm like, I am not buying it for 14. Go to an estate agent, put it on the market, and sell it. I am not going to buy it for 14. They went to an estate agent, sold it for £17,500.
Yeah.
Do you think that guy respects me today?
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do you see what I mean about you better be morally on the right compass here? You better have the right moral compass when you do things like this, because all these things will come back to haunt you if you don't. That's why it's so important when you're doing the long game. This is the other lesson I learned from this. That's why it's so important when you're doing the long game that you actually be morally correct and your moral compass is right, because it'll come back to haunt you later on and you'll be left with nothing because no one will want to do business with you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, because if you're in it for the long game and you do people wrong along your journey, further down the line, it's going to come back around, and words travels fast, and you don't want to have a bad reputation of being that person, because you will lose business and you'll lose credibility for it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that definitely. It is your credibility. You know, the one thing I've learned over the years, and this is a real good one for everybody to take note of. Your honor and integrity is the only thing that you can give away yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And if you maintain your honor and your integrity over the years, you've always got that. No one can touch that.
Can take that away from you.
You could only do it yourself. And it's kind of like, I know I'm a bit geeky when I talk about this. I talk about the Klingons, and you know, the Klingons, you know, have their honor and integrity, and that's how they live. And then you have the Vulcans, who are logical. Roddenberry was a genius when he came to this. And then you had the humans, and then you also had all the different ones that represented all different. You had the Ferengis, which were always greedy and they always wanted money, and they always wanted to do business, and always wanted to trade, and always wanted. So you know how he did that, and he built all these types of different profiles into the culture, into the show, and Star Trek. Yeah, that's the kind of thing I think. You know, be like a Klingon. You know, maintain your honor and your integrity. That's the most important thing, because you're the only one that could give that away and lose it by your actions.
Mm-hmm.
Think logically, like a Vulcan. You know, from time to time, your human side, rather than your emotional side, which is your chimp, which
can take over easily.
The Vulcans don't think like that at all. That's the other side of the Vulcans, which are the Romulans. The Romulans are the emotional Vulcans. So see how he built all that in?
Yeah.
It's a bit geeky. The Trekkies will get this.
Yeah, the Trekkies will get it, but it makes sense though. And it definitely relates to real life scenarios.
Roddenberry was a big inspiration. He set a lot of things in motion. You would never have the space exploration programs. You would never have your mobile phones how they are today if it wasn't for people like Gene Roddenberry, because you know that's where Star Trek, that's where all these dreams were built. The only people that create anything in the world are the dreamers. So dream big.
Yeah.
So next one. Actually, this is where I started to meet my business partner for the first time, Gordon Jackson from Remax. So Gordon worked as a Remax agent. He was the top in Scotland, number one in Scotland as a Remax agent, as an estate agent. And I actually bought this. This was the first property I bought from him, which was a 1-bedroom, and it was actually in it was in the Leadmouth area, but it was all part of ex-local authority properties. I mean, most properties were ex-local authority anyway, but this is the first one I bought in a block where it was on 3 levels this time.
Think in that block, you're one, and there's only one other that are privately owned. The rest of them are still.
That's from local authority, and I'm like happy days, because the local authority actually look after it very, very well, and I just pay my maintenance fees every year for it, and I pay my fees for the laundry because it has its own.
There's a laundry room and things. Yeah.
When people want it, and they look after everything, and they just say, look, we're needing a bit soffits fixed, and we're needing that fixed, and they're like, I no bother, I'll pay that. And because they own the majority, it doesn't really matter, because they take most of the hit if there's any huge costs. I'm only taking a small minority of that because I only have a certain portion of the building.
Yeah.
So this was actually a good buy. I ended up buying this one again, another 1-bedroom, for 30 grand. See how I'm starting to buy them in October 2004, 30 grand. Mortgage was 28. Lifetime tracker, base plus 0.99. Literally, it cost me £105 today, every month. And I'm making £395 every month on that, on rent.
We've got a really good tenant there, and we've just done a really nice refurb after the tenant was, I mean, was it 10 years? Was it more than 10 years he was in there?
Now,
So it was time to refurb, obviously.
the refurb here, that's the 30,000, but the refurb isn't in there capitalised because a tenant lives in it. Therefore, I'm able to set it off against my cost straight away. Because if you're replacing like for like, in other words, you're putting a new kitchen on an old kitchen, then you don't capitalise it. You actually write it off against your costs. This was golden opportunities to bring down my tax for the year.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, let's do the refurb. Let's put a new bathroom in. Now, I had a lot of people staying with me for loads and loads of years that are extremely loyal because I was able to move them up and down. Now, Jim was one of them, and his brother-in-law was one of them, Alec. And they're no longer here, unfortunately. But again, they all brought me really good tenants as well because everybody recommended me to everybody else that they knew. So I literally never really needed to go about looking for a lot of tenants because I had a really good track record, and therefore they were all
word of mouth served you well.
Everybody they knew. Everybody they knew. They were just basically, I was just getting phone calls going, "You got any flats? I'm looking to move out of my existing landlord. I want to come and live with you." So see how I was taking business off of other landlords without actually me doing anything because of what I was doing and what I was providing.
What you were providing,
I think the most important thing for me and how I got like that was because I remember I remember people, when I used to go to a lot of tenant association meetings. Now that's for landlords, they always used to keep clear of this. I used to go to their meetings. And I was the one who used to get pelts all the time. They used to have a go at me because I was the only private landlord who would ever dare to appear at a tenant's meeting or a resident's meeting. So, but I was like, well, the only way I'm ever going to learn or the only way I'm ever going to get any feedback is actually go to these meetings. Now, in the majority of cases, it was okay. It went well, but you had the odd person, obviously, pitchfork out, ready to go, ready to have a go at a private landlord, and therefore I would get at both guns. And then I would say, well, what's the point of me coming back then if that's the case? Because you're just going to have a go at me every time. But then it would be an opportunity for me to educate them as well and say, well, I know you're going about landlord registration and everything like that. I remember this one where a councillor actually stood up and had a go at private landlords. And I went, well, you need to sort out private landlord registration then because it's not actually taking anybody to task at all, ever. You'd be lucky if one person or two people have actually been prosecuted under private landlord legislation. And actually, so it's all a sledgehammer to crack a nut all these years, and it's toothless legislation. It's not worth the paper it's written on. It's just somebody put it in place and thought it'd be a great idea, but to enforce it is it's almost impossible. But that was, again, I was the chairman of the National Landlord Association. I had built up a landlord association. This was another thing as well. I had got together a number of bigger landlords in the area and actually started Fife Landlords Association because I was sick to death of the way the council treated private landlords at that time. This was back in 1999. The private landlords at that time, because they basically looked at us as if we were an annoyance and we were people that couldn't care less about our tenants. When in actual fact that wasn't true. I was completely horrified when I used to see some of the way the older landlords had been in it way before me, how they looked after tenants and how tenants actually thought about themselves, especially people on benefits. When I used to go to tenant association meetings and I used to speak to people who were on benefits, and they were sitting next to me, so I was saying, so how are you getting on with the rest of it? Yeah, my landlord, and it might have been the council, it might have been a private landlord, you don't know. My landlord's this, and my landlord's no doing that, and my landlord's no, but I shouldn't really bother them because I'm really getting benefits. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. What do you mean you shouldn't bother them because you're getting benefits? You've got the same rights as everybody else. It just so happens that the government's helping you out with your rent. I say,
the rent's still getting paid either way.
Why should you not expect your heating to be fixed, your kitchen to be up to scratch, your electrics to be up to scratch, your gas certificate to be in place? Why should you not expect that? But I'm just, and it really appalled me to a degree of how that was the case, and that's why that was one of the drivers behind me putting together the Landlords Association, was to actually try and start to professionalise the circuit and professionalise the business itself, because most people just lived you know, as a wee cottage industry, and we have one or two, and we're not really sure what we're doing, and all the rest of it. And that was the difficulty with that. So that's what drove me on more to actually help people in a position where they could not buy a house, but they had nowhere else to go, and they ended up with what I would deem at that time would be a slum landlord.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know a guy that I first of all sat down with, and I walked in to buy one of his properties when he showed me around, because he was exiting the market and going to Edinburgh, the Edinburgh market, and there was water running down the walls, and the wallpaper was hanging off and all the rest of it. And I came out and sat in the car, and he turned around to me, and I was appalled, and I went, well, I says, what's, you know, getting that fit? Yeah, I says, but these people, you know, that's just the way they want to live. And the you know, and he did use the word scum. And I'm like, you know, laugh. And thank God that guy isn't in the market now. But I was appalled when I heard things like that. And that was another reason why I started the Landlord Association. So safety in numbers, a universal voice for landlords in Fife. So we could have one source which could communicate with the council and get things done. And that's when it started to all increase. The council started to have a universal voice from the landlords. They started to engage with us. Fife Council was one of the most prolific landlords in the whole of Britain. They were one of the most prolific landlord engagers in the whole of Britain. They were pioneers for a lot of things. Private sector leasing, where you leased houses off the private market for the landlords for Fife Council.
Yeah,
that was us that did that. And then it rolled out to Edinburgh, and then it rolled out to the rest of Scotland, and then it rolled out to the rest of the UK. Charter marked landlord, where landlords were approved. Actually, private landlords were approved by the local authority. That was us that did that. That was Fife Council that blazed that trail. Charter marked landlords, where landlords were actually given a charter mark and approval. I was the first one. I was also the first letting agent by the council, way before landlord registration, way before accreditation, way before anything like that. And this was in the early 2000s, because we helped put that together with them. We helped put all that together as part of our organisation, and then that was used as a template by all the other local authorities as well to put it out right out throughout Scotland and the local authorities. So this is all the things that I learned over the years. See how engaged. Now, at this point in time, Richard, I'm sitting with about 20, 25 properties. I am still working full-time in industry, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm still working full-time. And in 2004, I was a financial controller, but I was instrumental in helping run a company, a manufacturing company, as one of their frontline managers, like the decision makers, just almost like director level. And I was helping to run that company at the same time, as well as having to self-manage 25 properties myself.
I bet that took its toll.
Well, it did, and you know that story, and I'll talk about that later on in this journey, not in this, but in the next episode.
Yeah, as we move.
Wait to hear the next one. How I made $1 million and how I lost it all, and that'll be a great story. But your failures, you can learn just as much by your successes, I would say.
Yeah.
So that was that one. Base plus 0.99, and again, the next one for me, October 2004, was a 3-bedroom semi-detached house.
3-bedroom semi-detached, yeah. It was.
Yeah. Now, I'll be honest, at this point in time, it wasn't going well with my relationship with my wife. And lo and behold, that's why this property was actually bought originally. We went to see this with a prospect of me moving to it. And luckily, I managed to sort things out. This was all driven by me, remember. I'm climbing the walls at this point in time. I am excessively drinking because your stress levels are way up here, and people use drink as a mechanism in order to relieve stress. But listen, it just makes it worse. And I've got to work 160 hours a week. I'm on a hamster wheel. And I'm not able to get off. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. And when you've got that sort of prospect, that's when the dark thoughts start to come in. But I kept going. because I thought I need to do this. I have to do this. It's all or nothing. I was literally prepared to kill myself to get this, and nearly did. So this is why I bought this house. We bought this for 100,000, and it was a private sale actually. It was a private sale at the time, and luckily enough, it all worked out right. So then we ended up getting a buy-to-let mortgage on it, and it was at 67,000. So there was a huge amount of equity built up in this, which is about £30,000. But again, I got it on a tracker, base plus 0.149. And literally, at one point in time, I was paying £69 a month for that 3-bedroom semi-detached house. And I was earning £750 a month in rent.
I was going to say, because just so I was aware, it's in quite a popular residential area.
It's one of the most popular areas ever, I would say. One of the most popular areas in Leaving, in the Leaving area. And everybody wants it. And as soon as, well, we've just put one on in that area right now.
I noticed that,
and it's like, oh my God, 10,000 views later and about 20, maybe 40 inquiries later. And that property is very, very popular. So there's a very, very popular area. Subsequently, the price recovered. I saw an opportunity in 2017, actually, just recently. It was never in my portfolio, but it never really appreciated back to the 100,000 till a lot of years later. And I was able to sell it in 2017 for 135,000.
Because I thought it was 130, but 135.
Yeah, and for me personally, that released the 35, and then it released the 25 as well. I never really wanted to let go of the tracker because it was so advantageous. You know,
especially for that property and things. That's good.
And I didn't want to. That was my first venture into the Dunfermline building site. It gave me that rate.
Yeah.
And I remember the Dunfermline building site. We had a challenge with that house for one thing. I do remember at one point, apparently we had to solemn the whole floor underneath. Actually put concrete down and a membrane down as well in order to protect the water from coming up from beneath. We had to revamp the whole kitchen. But when we started to do that, that's when I looked at the opportunity of actually selling it. I didn't see the point of keeping a hold of it because there was so much money tied up in here. I could have done something else better with it. And I did do something else better with it. I actually gave the money to my daughter when I sold it to actually get her first house. So we gifted it to her as for that reason. Obviously, we paid capital gains in it. I lost a huge amount of capital gains, by the way, over the years because indexation was now changed to normal mainstream 18% or 28%. So my 60% allowance that I was going to get in capital gains allowances on indexation was completely removed. Round about 2010, I think it was. They just took them all away. So you never actually got that anymore. But it still made sense to do it and release the money because it was for better things, and it was for my daughter to get on the property ladder and get her first property. Listen, there's people moaning out there they can't get a property as a first-time buyer. Well, that's because you're trying to live in a house. It took your parents 40 years to get.
Yeah.
And that's what the expectation is of some of the younger generation. And that should not be your expectation. Your expectation would be to start somewhere and it's actually get yourself a 1 or a 2-bedroom flat. Get yourself started, get yourself on the ladder, secure your place on that ladder, make sure your flat goes up at the same time as other property prices. So when you're ready to upgrade, because you get a salary increase or you've stuck in at college or you've been to university and you get a better career choice and a higher salary, then you can actually get a bigger house. There's too many people out there castigating and saying it's not fair, it's not fair, it's not fair. But when you look at your own circumstances, have you been to college? Have you been to university? Have you passed all your exams? Did you stick in at school? And the answer to most people's answer to that is no, they didn't do anything. They did jack shit.
But they still have the expectation. It's about managing their own.
They still expect to have a house. It's an entitlement culture. I've done jack shit all my life, but I want a house and I'm entitled to a house. Well, newsflash, the world does not work like that. So that's where the conversation probably begins to end, I would say. We'll talk about ones later on, but for me personally, that was a revelation for me, obviously, because of the implications of what the strain it could have on my marriage and my personal life and all the rest of it. But this was getting to the point where it was becoming so overwhelming I then started thinking, wait a minute, I'm at a number of properties I could actually exit.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll talk about this next week, actually, how I did that.
Do you know what I thought?
I could exit, just to say, I knew I could exit, but I didn't know whether I could continue to build if I did exit.
Right, okay.
So in other words, I could replace my income, but I didn't know if I had enough to replace my income and continue to have income to then build my portfolio even more. And that was my concern at the 25 properties. And I'll talk about that next week, how I did that and how I overcame that. Because it approaching 2005 was probably approaching the 37, 36-year-old mark. How many people did you know at that point in time retired at 36, 37, 38-year-old?
Be very few, far between.
Never.
Or if any around here.
Yet the guys that I'd been going about, who I'd been mentored by, some of them were retiring at 25-year-old.
Yeah.
Now, they weren't in property, and that's why I didn't know anybody in property, and I thought, you just don't do this. Remember, I'm conditioned all my life to say that you retire at 65 with a pension.
Yeah, that's ingrained in everyone.
To get that round your head about, wait a minute, I could retire before I'm 40. Remember, this was a goal of mine, though. Be a financial director before I'm 30. Retire before I'm 40. But I just didn't think I was ready to take that leap. And there was a number of indicators that told me that. But there was one overriding factor that was stopping me doing it. And we'll talk about it next week.
Okay. Yeah, that was really good, Jim. I think we spoke actually, we spoke previously about retirement isn't about age, it's about money. And I think from today, it's good. It is quite educational to listen to your journey. But what I took for that today is not only have you went through that investment journey, but how you built up your own reputation and your status as a go-to kind of landlord investor who was trusted within the local area and things, and how you built that up. I think that's quite an interesting and poignant thing of your story as well, because it's got you to where you've got to be today. Yeah. So
this was incidentally at the time as well, where people were starting to ask me, would you manage my properties?
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait a minute, just look at my situation. Actually, I'll talk about it next week.
Yeah, okay. No, that's fine. That was a good show, and really a lot of good points there, Jim. We've got a couple of comments coming through. Dave's obviously said about the 3 P's of success are plan, prepare, and protect. Gary, Gary's one of our landlords. Agents get maintenance done at a much better price as well, which is very true, Gary, and you'll know that obviously from experience. So thanks everybody for listening in. And
I've got a quick one from TikTok as well. Would you recommend buying a second house to live in and rent out the first property rather than selling? If the numbers make sense, absolutely. However, I never ever, when I first bought Durward Street, my very first house or first flat for 20,000, I don't think I would be where I am if I had kept a hold of that one and tried to move to a next one without actually releasing the capital.
Releasing the money that was in it, yeah.
Yeah, and because by that time you were, so the numbers have to make sense for you. So, I don't know who BL4YNP is, but it's a good question. And I'd need to know more about it. But for me personally, I didn't keep a hold of Durward Street when I had it. I didn't keep a hold of Canarchy when I did it. I did keep a hold of the one at Taylor Street. And I've still got that today in our joint names.
Yeah.
Because it was a great property. It was at a great price point, and it's a huge amount of property for what it is.
Yeah.
And it could accommodate 1, 2, 3 bedrooms the way we've geared it, but it could also accommodate 2 bedrooms. And it's got a wee WC upstairs in one of the bedrooms, eh?
Yeah,
I just love the fact that you had your own WC in your bedroom.
That's quite cool.
This is a flat, it's 27 grand and it's got its own WC. On suite. So I think that's what I loved about it, and that's why I kept it. But it was so affordable to keep. There's another one as well, Molly the Doug. Would you say if you own your own house outright, would you say if you own a house right, you're in a good position? Okay, let me answer that. This is going to be the end. Obviously, Instagram Live, and that'll run right now. That's okay. So Instagram will keep running, TikTok will keep running, but this is where the show will end for Instagram, because you can only put less than an hour up on a pre-recorded. So we'll still do the Instagram live, we'll still let it run live, but we'll put the hour up later, so it ends right now. But to answer your question, Molly the Doug, would you say if you own your own house outright, you're in a good position? It depends on where you are. Remember, I'm not giving financial advice, but me personally, I do not own my house outright. I've actually just put my next mortgage on a new deal, which I've got 130,000 on my house on a mortgage. And I've had it ever since I lived next door to where I am right now, because I used to live in a house before, next door, and I ported the mortgage over. It was a nationwide. I ported it over, and then I've got it in the Clydesdale. It's an interest only. Wow, interest only on your own personal house. But you still get that now because they had to stick to that in the credit crunch. They weren't allowed to change people on the capital repayment. So I've still got that deal till 2032. Now, if I can get interest only, and I'm only going to be paying, I'm going to pay a discounted mortgage, by the way. I think it's 2.5 below whatever the level is, variable rate. It means I'm paying about 490 a month, okay? But I'm only paying on maybe what? If it's 7% now, the variable rate, I'll be paying 4.5%. If I can make 10% or more on that money, and trust me, I can make a lot more than that. You know, people say, "Don't wait, you're making 15." You're probably right. I'm probably making a bit more, 25 and 20, rather than 15% return on money. But if I can make more money with that 130,000 that I've got on my house right now, then I would want to make the more money and then just pay my mortgage day to day, or week to week, or month to month, knowing at some point I've got that money tied up in property, remember, so we've no lost it, and that money's appreciating in value over the long term on the property, plus it's earning money and rent as well. So that's why I would never want to pay it off. But if it came to a point where I would obviously want to pay off my mortgage, I'd sell these properties and I'd just pay that mortgage off. See what I mean? So I'm not owning my house outright isn't my goal here. Owning your house outright isn't, you know, for most people it will be a goal, because then obviously they've got no costs. Their plan is actually to retire on the income that they've got fixed by an insurance company called a pension, and they know what they've got coming in. But my objective is actually to make as much money as possible, knowing that if I drop back to a base level, I can live on that as well. Makes no difference. So I'm not too bothered about it. I'm not too bothered about it. I don't bother about owning my own house and having my own house. You do have your own house, but you don't really own it outright. A bank usually typically owns it because you've got a mortgage. And so you can borrow against your house. See, there's another one as well. And I'm not going to tell anybody to do this, right? But effectively what I'm doing is I'm borrowing the 130,000 still against my house. And I've still got that 130,000 invested in property, which earns me rent every single month and actually appreciates in value every single month. Now, this is outside of my house. The ownership of my house is making sure I stay on the property ladder at the same equilibrium as everybody else. And what I mean by that is, let me think about it and say this right. If property prices went up 10% next year, my house will go up 10%, and the house I'm going to buy is going to go up 10%. If property prices drop 10%, my house will go down to 10%, and the property I'm going to buy is going to go down 10%. If I don't have a house, I'm left open. I'm left exposed to that. Now, I might benefit from the downturn if I don't own, but if it goes up, I'll certainly not benefit.
You're going to lose that benefit.
And history has always told us property goes up over the medium to long term every single time. You show me a case over the medium to long term where property has never gone up, and I'll call you a bullshitter, because it has never been the case. If you look at the numbers since 1984, I've got numbers since 1950s, and the whole of Britain, every single county, what the average price was in every single county from the 1950s, every single month, and how that price is a huge spreadsheet. that I managed to find on the Register of Scotland, or the registers of National Registers, and I was able to download it, and it's got all the information. So I'm able to track where it all was, and actually, I don't go geeky and get a big graphic and say, oh, and Torquay, it was so and so, and all the rest of it. That's just daft. I just look at it to see the trends where I am right now, and then I compare that to then where we are in terms of the UK economy. So I'll just get another couple of questions here. See if we've got here. Would you save your own house? Right. And then, yeah, speak to a property boss, mate. Plenty of advice. Okay. All right, we've got people saying don't want to be doing that. Stay broke.
Yeah.
Stay in poverty. Tell you what, money won't buy you happiness. And you tried it lately. I could say that to everybody. You tried it lately. I tell you what, because it goes a long way. If you've ever got a problem, try beating it to death with a bag of money. Sometimes it goes away. More often it does. You won't own anything if you have a mortgage when the government brings in the CBDC, mate. I think that's drugs you're talking about, pal.
CBD. Yes.
Woohoo! Stop it. It's like coming to America when he says, look, son, look, Akeem, I'll give you some advice. When Akeem's all happy when he comes in and he's talking to the boss at McDowell's on Coming to America. This is Eddie Murphy, and he's talking all jovial and happy and positive. And Mr. McDowell goes, Akeem, if I can give you some advice, he went, look, son, just stay off the drugs. Make sure you own your house right soon. All right, make sure you own your house right. It's house ownership is only a mechanism to make you feel safe and where you are right now. The reality is, for people out there that have house ownership, I know people that have got all their money tied up in their house. They cannot release the money, and it's purely for the fact that in order to release it, they've got to sell the house. Yeah. And you've got all this money tied up, and you can't do anything with it, because it's all tied up. So you can't go on great holidays. I know there's an old lady, and I remember this story, and she took me around. She says, I've got nobody to leave my money to because I've got no family. I'm in this flat, and the flat's worth £70,000. It's all paid off. And I'm aggrieved and annoyed because I can't go anywhere, because then I would have to rent anyway. So I'd need that money for that. But I can't spend any of this money at all.
It's all tied
up. It's just going to go to the state.
Yeah.
Somebody else is going to get it, and I can't enjoy any of it. And these sort of stories stick in my mind. Hence, you know why my next move, I'm renting.
Yeah.
And all this money will be released and passed on to my children, outside of the potential exempt transfer for inheritance tax.
Yeah.
Of the 7 year. So I need to survive 7 years to do that. It'll be transferred to my children. And if I need money, they can give me money back. It's like, you've got to have a really good trusting relationship. And this is where you make sure, it's like, you better make sure you brought them up properly.
Yeah.
You've not been a total shit to them.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to give it to you big style now. And that's it. So let's talk about this next week. What stopped me retiring, and why would you manage my properties? Why would I manage my properties? You know, that's the things we're going to talk about next week. Okay. That's me. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thanks for that.
Appreciate that. Bye bye for now, folks. I can't answer. Actually,